I'm Lena, 31 years old, and my daughter Ella is everything to me. She's 12, full of energy, and the sweetest soul I know. My relationship with my parents, Robert and Carolyn, and my brother Daniel, that's where things get messy. When I left Ella in their care for a weekend work conference, I had a bad feeling in my gut. What I never imagined was that just 3 days later, I'd be sitting in a hospital room watching my daughter recover from emergency surgery on a broken leg. They made her walk on for 3 hours. We didn't have time for the they said. Before I go on, where are you watching from? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to find out how I dealt with this heartbreaking betrayal. Life as a single mom is never easy. But Ella and I had figured out our rhythm. Since my divorce from Eric 5 years ago, I've focused everything on giving Ella a steady, loving home. Eric's job moved him across the country. While he sends child support regularly, his visits are hit or miss. Ella understands. She's always been wise beyond her years. I've done everything I can to fill that gap to be both her mother and her father. My relationship with my parents has always been rocky. Robert and Carolyn live in a beautiful lakeside home about 2 hours from our city apartment. It's a picture-perfect cabin with a private dock and forest trails, the kind of place Ella loves. But underneath that lovely surface is something much colder. Growing up, I was never quite what they wanted. Robert, a retired surgeon, demanded perfection. Carolyn, a former school principal, criticized everything. Their disapproval never let up. My A's in school? Not good enough. My casual style? Too sloppy. My decision to teach instead of follow their path into medicine? A disappointment. Even now, at 31, with a master's degree and a stable job as a high school English teacher, I still feel like a teenager around them. Never enough. Then there's Daniel, my younger brother by 3 years. Somehow, he could do no wrong. The golden child. He followed Dad's path into medicine, and when he became an orthopedic surgeon like Robert, you'd think he cured cancer from how they reacted. Still, I kept contact for Ella's sake. I believed she deserved to know her grandparents and uncle. They loved her in their own way. Ella loved fishing with Grandpa Robert, baking with Grandma Carolyn, and listening to Uncle Daniel's dramatic hospital stories. I tried hard to protect her from the small, sharp criticisms that had chipped away at my confidence for years. And most of the time, I succeeded. So when my principal asked me to represent our school at an educational conference in Chicago, a huge opportunity that might finally get me the department head role, I hesitated but arranged for Ella to stay with my parents. It's only 3 days, Mom, Ella said as she packed her favorite books. At 12, she was in that beautiful in-between stage, still my little girl, but slowly growing into her own person. Her dark hair was tied into a simple ponytail, and her bright blue eyes sparkled with excitement. I'll be fine. Grandpa said we might go hiking to the waterfall. I checked her suitcase and added an extra sweater. April in Minnesota is unpredictable. I know you'll be okay, sweetheart. Just don't forget to take your allergy meds every morning, and try not to let Grandpa give you too much sugar before bed. I know, Mom. She rolled her eyes and laughed. We've done this before. We had, but never for more than 1 day. Something about this trip felt off. Maybe it was the weight of the conference. Maybe it was that Daniel had suddenly decided to spend the weekend there too. He and his wife Natalie were going through something, and he needed space. Daniel's presence always changed the mood, made my parents colder toward me, like his golden glow cast a shadow over everything I did. That Friday afternoon, I drove Ella to the lake house. The place looked stunning in the early spring, trees beginning to bloom, the lake sparkling through the woods, and the frame house my father built before I was born standing tall. My parents met us on the porch. Carolyn immediately scolded Ella's light jacket. That's nowhere near warm enough, she said, hurrying her inside. I've already set out better clothes for the weekend. I bit my tongue. Ella glanced at me and gave a look that said, it's okay, I've got Grandma. Robert barely looked at me, already launching into a long explanation about the hiking trail planned for Saturday. The waterfall's amazing this time of year, he said, with the snow melting. It's flowing like crazy, but you'll need proper shoes, not those flimsy sneakers. I packed her hiking boots, Dad, I said, putting her suitcase in the guest room. They're the ones you and Mom got her for Christmas. He nodded, distracted. Daniel's bringing steaks for dinner tomorrow. Should be here around noon, of course. Daniel's arrival was the main event. Before I left, I pulled my mother aside in the kitchen. Mom, Ella sometimes gets homesick. If she needs to call me, even late, please let her. Carolyn waved a hand. Lena, we've raised kids before. And we did a fine job, thank you. The implication that I hadn't been raised successfully wasn't lost on me. She'll be fine. We don't coddle her like you do. I bit back a reply. She's also had some knee pain from soccer. If it flares up, there's ibuprofen in her toiletry bag. Robert was a surgeon for 35 years, and Daniel's a doctor. I think we can handle a little knee ache, she said sharply. When Daniel showed up, I was getting ready to leave. He barely acknowledged me before wrapping Ella in a huge hug. There's my favorite niece. Ready for an awesome weekend with your cool uncle? Ella laughed. I forced a smile. Daniel had always been good with Ella, though a bit too much. His gifts were over the top. His stories sounded like movie scripts, but Ella adored him. Drive safe, Lena, was all he said to me. I hugged Ella tightly. Be good, sweetheart. Call me before bed, okay? I whispered. I love you more than anything. Love you too, Mom. Don't worry, you're gonna rock that conference. As I pulled away, I saw her waving from the porch, sandwiched between my stiff parents and my grinning brother. That image would stay with me, my sweet, innocent girl standing among the very people who would let her down so deeply. The conference in Chicago started off great. My presentation on literacy methods for diverse learners was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Friday's events were filled with good networking and inspiring speeches. Still, I couldn't stop checking my phone. Ella's occasional texts made me smile. She told me about the banana pancakes Grandma made and the woodpecker she saw near the dock that evening. I called like I promised, but no one picked up. I tried 3 times over 2 hours. My worry grew. Finally, around 9:30 p.m., Robert called me back. Ella's already asleep, he said bluntly. We had a long day getting the boat ready for summer. She was wiped out. Can you wake her? I promised I'd say goodnight. Lena, don't be silly. The child needs rest, not to be disturbed because you're anxious about being away. I held back my frustration. Can she call me in the morning then? We're hiking early. She'll call you when we return. He hung up before I could reply. That was so typical of Robert, making decisions for everyone. No room for input. I tried texting Ella, but the message didn't go through. I figured it was just bad cell service. I turned back to my presentation notes, trying to focus. What I didn't know then, what Ella would later sob out to me from a hospital bed, was what really happened that Saturday. According to Ella, the day started off fine. Daniel showed up early, bringing donuts and way too much energy. Robert had mapped out a challenging trail that looped to the waterfall and back 7 miles total. Ella was excited, but also nervous. Maybe we should take the shorter one, she had said at breakfast. Mom and I usually do the 3-mile trail. Your mother babies you, Robert told her. You're old enough for a real hike. Besides, Daniel wants to see the upper falls. And just like that, the decision was made. What Ella wanted didn't matter. What Daniel wanted did. That pattern, I knew it far too well. They headed out around 9 o'clock a.m. Ella wore the right boots, jeans, and layered clothes for the warming spring weather. She packed water, snacks, and her phone. But Carolyn immediately took it away. No screens in nature, she said. This is family time. The first part of the hike was lovely. By noon, they reached the waterfall, where they sat down to eat. Sandwiches Carolyn had packed. Ella said the view was stunning, water rushing down mossy rocks from the spring melt. It was on the way back from the waterfall that everything fell apart. Just about a mile into their return, the path narrowed as it followed alongside a stream, becoming slick and rocky from the spray of the rushing water. Ella was cautious, but my father and Daniel kept a fast pace ahead, with Carolyn right behind them. No one was paying attention when Ella's foot slipped on a mossy rock. Her leg twisted underneath her as she fell, and she heard a loud, awful crack. The pain hit instantly, sharp and unbearable. She screamed, the sound echoing through the trees. My family came rushing back to find her curled on the trail, clutching her right leg with tears pouring down her face. It's broken, she cried. Something snapped, I heard it. Daniel knelt beside her, finally putting his medical training to use. Her leg was already swelling when he examined it. Looks like a tibia fracture, he said. We need to get her to INR. For a moment, Ella felt relief. Her uncle was a doctor. He'd help. They'd call me, and everything would be okay. But then Robert looked at his watch. We've got dinner with the Hendersons at 7, he reminded Carolyn. We won't make it to the hospital and back in time. Can't we cancel? Ella asked through sobs. It really hurts. Carolyn's lips tightened. The Hendersons are your grandfather's oldest friends. This dinner's been planned for months. Ella turned to Daniel, hoping he'd insist on getting her real help. But he just shrugged. It's probably just a hairline fracture. No big deal. We can ice it at the house and check it again later. But how do I get back? Ella asked, feeling dizzy from the pain. I can't walk. The solution they came up with still makes my blood boil. My father found a branch and turned it into a makeshift walking stick. Daniel claimed that walking on it might even be good. Weight-bearing fractures supposedly heal better, he said. A dangerously simplified medical claim. Carolyn chimed in that there was no time for overreacting. No one carried her. No one went to get help. Instead, they forced my 12-year-old daughter to walk for 3 hours with a broken leg. Ella described the whole return as a blur of pain. Every step was torment. She cried until she had nothing left and then continued, in silent agony. She begged for her phone to call me. They refused. She asked to rest. They only let her stop briefly, pushing her along so they wouldn't be late for dinner. By the time they got back to the house, Ella's leg was horribly swollen, with dark bruises spreading from her knee to her ankle. She couldn't put any weight on it anymore. So finally, Robert and Daniel carried her the last part of the way. Their idea of treatment? A little ice, 2 ibuprofen, and propping her leg up on pillows in the guest room. Carolyn brought her some soup and crackers, then left her alone while they all got dressed for dinner. We'll only be gone a few hours, my mother told her. There's water by your bed and the TV remote. Try to rest. So there she was left alone, in agony. With a broken leg, in a house 2 miles from the nearest neighbor. She tried to use the landline to call me, only to find it dead. A tree had knocked the line out earlier that week, a fact my family failed to mention. With no phone, no way to reach anyone, Ella lay in bed, drifting in and out of sleep from the pain and exhaustion. Back in Chicago, I was growing more and more panicked. I kept texting, kept calling, but by Sunday morning, I was completely frantic. Nothing since Friday. No calls, no texts. I'd left dozens of messages for my parents. For Daniel even tried calling neighbors. The last session of my conference wasn't until 2:00 p.m., but by 9:00 a.m., I couldn't wait any longer. I told the organizers there was a family emergency, packed up my things, and began the 3-hour drive home to Minnesota. My thoughts were spinning the entire way. Maybe the phones were dead. Maybe the reception was just bad. Maybe it was something worse. By the time I turned onto the gravel road to my parents' place, my hands were shaking on the wheel. All 3 cars were in the driveway: Robert's SUV, Carolyn's sedan, and Daniel's flashy sports car. At least they were home. I pulled in around noon. The gravel crunched under my tires. No one came outside. I opened the door without knocking. It was still my childhood home. After all, what I walked into was surreal. Normal. My parents and Daniel were sitting in the living room, playing Scrabble, coffee mugs and pastries neatly set on the table. All 3 looked up when they saw me. Lena, we weren't expecting you until tonight, my mother said, as if I'd broken some social rule by arriving early. I've been trying to reach you for nearly 2 days, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Where's Ella? Still sleeping, Daniel answered casually. She's fine, just resting after a little fall on the trail. Little fall? My heart jumped. What fall? What happened? My father sighed, setting his tiles down. She slipped on some rocks and hurt her leg. It's nothing serious. We've been keeping an eye on it. If it's not serious, why didn't anyone call me? Why hasn't she called me? The landline's out, my mother said. And you know the cell service up here is terrible. Where's her phone? I asked sharply. I have it, Carolyn admitted. She was getting too attached. We wanted her to have a break from screens. I didn't wait to hear another word. I pushed past them and rushed toward the guest room, my parents and Daniel trailing behind, still tossing out excuses and minimizing the situation. What I saw stopped me cold. Ella was lying in bed, her face pale and tight with pain. Her right leg was elevated on pillows twice its normal size, covered in deep, dark bruises. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, lit up when she saw me. Mom, she whispered, fresh tears spilling. You came early. I was at her side in a heartbeat. What happened, sweetheart? What did they do to you? Between sobs, Ella told me everything: the fall, the crack she heard, the tortuous 3-hour walk, being left alone while they went to dinner, and how nobody believed how much it hurt. As she spoke, I gently examined Her leg. Even without medical training, I could see the misalignment. This wasn't a sprain. This was serious. I turned to face my family, now clustered in the doorway. You made her walk on that for 3 hours and then left her alone? We gave her pain meds, Carolyn said defensively. 2 ibuprofen, Ella corrected in a whisper. Daniel said it was a minor fracture, Robert added, motioning to my brother, as if his medical degree excused what they'd done. Daniel shrugged. It didn't look that bad yesterday. Kids bounce back fast. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She needs a hospital. Lena, don't be dramatic, Robert said. If you'd just let me take a closer look. No. I cut him off, my voice low and hard. You've done enough. I'm taking my daughter to the emergency room. I scooped Ella into my arms. She felt so light, maybe it was the adrenaline, but I barely noticed her weight. My family followed, still making excuses and suddenly offering help. Should we come with you? My mother asked as I placed Ella gently into the back seat, propping her leg up with pillows. No, I said, not even looking at her. You've done enough. The 20-minute drive to the nearest hospital was rough. Ella whimpered every time we hit a bump. I called ahead so they'd be ready for us. By the time we arrived, she was in so much pain she could barely speak. The ER staff took one look at her leg and rushed her into a room. A kind woman, Dr. Rivera, ordered immediate x-rays and pain relief. When she returned, her face was serious. She has a displaced tibial shaft fracture, she said, pointing at the x-ray. The bone has completely broken and shifted. What does that mean? I asked, my throat tight. My biggest concern is the delay in treatment. Walking on it has caused soft tissue damage and increased the risk of complications. What kind of complications? Right now, compartment syndrome is the most urgent risk. That's when pressure builds in the muscle and damages nerves and blood vessels. There's also the chance of infection, improper healing, and long-term mobility issues. What does she need? Surgery, Dr. Rivera said firmly. We'll need to realign the bone and stabilize it with screws and a metal plate. Our orthopedic surgeon is on the way. I nodded, trying to absorb it all. If this had been treated right after the fall, I asked, her expression told me everything. A clean break might have only needed a cast, but walking on it, that changed everything. I sat next to her hospital bed, holding her hand, overwhelmed by the weight of everything my family had done. The unnecessary pain they caused, the complications they triggered, all of it settled over me like a heavy, choking blanket. I had trusted them with the person I loved most in this world, and they had failed us both in every way. When my parents and Daniel appeared in the doorway of the treatment room an hour later, I felt nothing but icy, focused fury. The pediatric orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Layden, arrived shortly after. After examining Ella and reviewing her x-rays, he confirmed what Dr. Rivera had already told us. Ella needed emergency surgery to repair the displaced fracture and deal with the soft tissue damage caused by being forced to walk on her broken leg. We'll need to insert a titanium rod and several screws, he explained. In children her age, we usually try to avoid such invasive procedures, but the displacement is severe and the tissue damage significant. Ella squeezed my hand tightly, her eyes filled with fear. Will it hurt? She asked. Dr. Layden's voice softened. You'll be asleep during the surgery, and we'll manage the pain carefully afterward. The good news is, young bones heal extremely well with the right care and physical therapy. You should regain full function. As they prepared to take her into surgery, I kissed her forehead. I'll be right here when you wake up, I promised. The moment they wheeled her out of the room, I turned to face my family, who were still awkwardly lingering by the door. Lena, don't you think you're overreacting? My father began. Surgery seems a bit much. If only you'd let me look at it. Stop, I interrupted him, my voice low and firm. Just stop. We didn't know it was this serious, my mother added. Ella didn't make it sound that bad. She cried in pain for hours. I snapped. She told you she heard the bone break. Kids exaggerate, Daniel said with a dismissive flick of his hand. I see it all the time. They come in thinking they're dying, and it's just a sprain. Something inside me snapped. This isn't just anything, Daniel. This is a displaced tibial fracture with soft tissue damage. You're an orthopedic surgeon, you should have recognized how serious it was immediately. In a clinical setting, sure, he tried to argue, but out there on the trail visibility was poor. Then you should have erred on the side of caution, I shouted, loud enough to make the nurses glance our way. I quickly lowered my voice again. You should have carried her, called for help, done anything other than force her to walk 3 hours on a broken leg. We had dinner plans, my mother said weakly. I stared at her, stunned. Dinner plans? I repeated. You left my injured 12-year-old alone in pain with no phone because of dinner plans? The Hendersons are very important to your father, she said, as if that excused it. More important than Ella's safety? Than her health? I said, my voice shaking. Lena, my father interjected in that same belittling tone he always used. You're being emotional. These doctors are probably covering themselves legally. I've seen this sort of thing 100 times. I close my eyes, memories crashing in, like the time I sprained my wrist at 10 and he insisted it was just bruised until the school nurse sent me for x-rays days later. Or when Daniel broke the neighbor's window and I was punished because Daniel would never do that. The constant cycle of minimizing my concerns and praising Daniel no matter what. She could have permanent damage, I said quietly. She's 12. She might need physical therapy for months. Because you couldn't skip a dinner party. Because none of you were willing to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth about how much it hurt. She'll be fine, Daniel insisted. Kids bounce back. Remember when I broke my arm climbing that tree? Dad said it right in the kitchen. And you got actual care the very next day. I reminded him. You weren't forced to climb back down the tree with a broken arm. Silence filled the waiting room. A nurse approached carefully. Miss Mitchell, your daughter is now in surgery. It should take about 2 hours. There's a private area for families if you'd prefer. I gave her a grateful nod. Thank you. As I gathered my purse, my mother stepped toward me. We'll wait with you. I stopped and turned to all three of them. In that moment, with Ella in surgery, I saw my family with absolute clarity. Maybe, for the first time, these people connected to me by blood had shown me exactly who they were. Over and over again. I just hadn't wanted to believe it until they endangered my daughter. No, I said calmly. You won't, Lena, be reasonable. My father tried. Reasonable? I let out a dry, bitter laugh. Was it reasonable to make Ella walk 3 miles on a broken leg? To leave her alone in pain with no working phone? To choose a dinner party over your injured granddaughter? We made a judgment call, Daniel said defensively. It's easy to criticize with hindsight. A judgment call? I repeated. Well, here's mine. I want you to leave. My mother's face crumpled. But Ella will want to see us when she wakes up. She doesn't need to see the people who ignored her pain and made it worse. I said, you're being dramatic, Robert said coldly. As usual. Maybe I am, I answered. But I'm also her mother. And that means protecting her even from family. Especially from family. Daniel stepped forward, his voice sharpening. You know, this is exactly why Eric left you. You blow everything out of proportion. That low blow was meant to wound me, to push me back into silence like they always had. But instead, I felt a strange calm strength settle over me. Ella is having emergency surgery, I said, looking directly at him, because you, a licensed orthopedic surgeon, decided a dinner party was more important than treating her broken leg properly. That's not being dramatic. That's just fact. I held his gaze without flinching. Now leave, all of you. My father's face twisted with anger. If we walk out now, don't expect us to come back. It was meant to scare me, but it felt like a release. I don't, I replied. They stormed out muttering about ungratefulness and overreaction. I didn't feel victorious, only exhausted and terrified for Ella. Her surgery lasted nearly 3 hours longer than expected because of the extent of the damage. When Dr. Layden finally came to speak with me, his face was cautiously hopeful. We stabilized the fracture with a titanium rod and several screws, he said. The soft tissue damage was significant, but we were able to address it. She's in recovery now and doing well. What's the long-term outlook? I asked. With the right follow-up and physical therapy, she should regain full function. She'll need to stay off the leg completely for at least 6 weeks, and then we'll gradually ease her back into activity. The hardware might need to be removed in a year once the bone's fully healed. I nodded, overwhelmed with relief. Can I see her? Ella was still groggy from the anesthesia when I entered the recovery room. Her right leg was in a temporary splint, waiting for the swelling to go down enough to cast it. Her face lit up when she saw me. Mom, she whispered. You're still here. I took her hand gently, avoiding the foreline. Of course I am, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. She glanced around the room. Where's Grandma? And Grandpa? And Uncle Daniel? I hesitated, not sure how much to say while she was still so fragile. They had to go, I told her softly. But don't worry about that now. You just focus on getting better. Tears filled her eyes. They didn't believe me, Mom. I told them it really hurt, but they said I was being dramatic. Uncle Daniel said I was fine. I swallowed my own tears. I believe you, Ella. I always will. And I'm so sorry this happened. She drifted back to sleep with her hand still in mine. And right then, I made a silent promise to her and to myself. This would never happen again. No matter what it took, I would protect her. Even if it meant cutting ties with the people who betrayed us so deeply. The days that followed were a blur of hospital rooms, medications, and coordination. Ella remained in the hospital for 3 days while the swelling went down, her leg still in a splint. I slept in the uncomfortable recliner beside her bed, leaving only to use the family shower or to call her school and mine. My principal was understanding. Ella's teachers quickly arranged for assignments to keep her caught up. Our real support system friends, co-workers, and neighbors rallied around us. My parents and Daniel never visited. Instead, they launched a flurry of texts and voicemails, some defensive, others blaming me. My mother claimed they were giving us space. My father insisted the doctors had gone overboard. Daniel said Ella's recovery would have been simpler if I hadn't rushed her to the ER and let him handle it. I read every message like it was from a stranger. Each one reminded me I'd made the right decision to send them away. The only family member who reached out with real concern was my Aunt Eleanor, my father's sister. She and Robert had been estranged for years, a history I now understood more clearly than ever. When she called after hearing about what happened, the first words out of her mouth were, "What can I do to help?" She lived 3 hours away but immediately offered to visit. "I'm not surprised Robert and Carolyn handled this so poorly," she said. "They did the same thing when you broke your collarbone at soccer camp, told you to tough it out for 2 days until your coach insisted on an x-ray." I'd almost forgotten that. One incident among many I'd buried. I thought that was normal, I told her. I thought that's just how families are. "It's not normal," Eleanor said firmly. "It's neglect." When we finally brought Ella home from the hospital, new challenges awaited us. Our third-floor walk-up apartment, once so ordinary, now felt impossible. Ella couldn't bear weight on her leg for 6 weeks. That meant crutches for everything. Even the simplest tasks became huge efforts. That first night back, I helped Ella bathe, change, and get settled into bed. We were both completely drained from the last few days. As I tucked her in, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Are we ever going to see Grandma and Grandpa again? Or Uncle Daniel?" I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words with care. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said. "What they did making you walk on your broken leg, leaving you alone while you were in pain, that wasn't okay. It wasn't safe." Ella nodded quietly. I kept thinking, "You would have believed me. You would have taken me to the doctor right away. Always," I promised. "If you're ever hurting, I will always believe you. And I will always make sure you get the care you need." Grandpa said I was being dramatic. "Like you." Her voice was small and unsure. "Is that bad? Being like you?" My heart ached. "Ella, listen to me. You weren't being dramatic. Your leg was seriously broken. The doctors confirmed that. And being like me? That's the greatest compliment I could ever receive. Because you are kind and brave and honest, everything I try to be." She gave a slight nod, but the sadness in her eyes lingered. It wasn't just the physical pain, it was the deeper hurt that comes from being betrayed by people you love and trust. The practical side of Ella's recovery came with its own hurdles. While our insurance covered most of her hospital stay and the surgery, the deductibles, copays, and upcoming therapy sessions were going to stretch my budget thin. I applied for medical leave, but it only covered a portion of my salary. My friend, Melissa, another English teacher, organized a meal train for us. A neighbor, Tom, who lived in our building, offered to help carry Ella up and down the stairs when needed. Even Eric, my ex-husband, called from Seattle. He was horrified when I told him what had happened and arranged weekly grocery deliveries for us. The hardest conversation I had was with Eric, especially about my parents' role in Ella's injury. He had always liked them and thought I exaggerated their behavior. Hearing what they'd done now left him stunned. "Jesus, Lena," he said finally. "I thought you were just being sensitive all those years. I had no idea they were capable of something like this." "Neither did I admitted. "Not to this level. Do you want me to fly out? I can take time off." The offer surprised me. Since the divorce, Eric had rarely rearranged anything for Ella. No, but thank you. We're managing. But maybe you could FaceTime her more. She really needs extra support right now. Of course, he said. Anything she needs. After a pause, he asked, and what about your parents? What are you going to do? It was the question I'd been asking myself over and over. What do you do when the people who are supposed to love and protect you show such heartless disregard? How do you balance the bonds of family with the need to protect your child? I don't know yet, I told him, but I do know this: I'm not letting them hurt her again. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I started looking up information about grandparent medical neglect and how to cut ties with toxic relatives. The results were overwhelming, but one link stood out: a support group for adults estranged from their parents. I joined immediately. That same night, I scheduled a consultation with a family law attorney, Patricia Reyes, who specialized in child protection. I explained everything: Ella's injury, the delay in care, the messages afterward. I even showed her the texts from my family. What they did falls under medical neglect, Patricia confirmed. As her mother, you absolutely have the right to limit their contact. If it comes to it, we can file for a protective order based on the harm they caused. I don't think they'll try to force contact, I said. They're more likely to disown me. Still, she said, document everything. Keep the messages. Keep all the medical records. If they try to go through anyone else or undermine your authority, you'll be ready. As Ella's healing journey began, the full weight of what had happened continued to unfold. Even simple tasks, like getting dressed or going to school, became logistical challenges. But Ella, in that strong way only kids seem to manage, adapted. She got good on crutches and developed impressive upper body strength. What was harder to gauge was the emotional damage. She started having nightmares of falling again, of being left alone. She became anxious if I was out of sight too long. When my mother sent a cheerful "get well soon" card with no mention of what had happened, Ella stared at it for a long moment before quietly asking me to throw it away. They don't think they did anything wrong, do they? She asked. No, sweetie, I said gently. They don't. Some people have a hard time admitting when they're wrong. I don't want to be like that, she whispered. I want to say I'm sorry when I mess up, and in that moment, I realized that even through the pain and betrayal, Ella was learning something my parents never did: accountability, empathy, and self-worth. As the days went by, the tone of messages from my parents and Daniel grew nastier. They accused me of turning Ella against them, of blowing things out of proportion, of being an ungrateful daughter. Not once did any of them say they were sorry. Not once did they admit what they'd done or the pain they caused. So I made my decision. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment outburst. It wasn't emotional. It was the clear, reasoned decision of a woman who had seen enough. My family had shown me over and over again who they truly were, and now, I finally believed them. After Ella had fallen asleep one afternoon, wiped out from that morning's therapy, I sat at the kitchen table with her medical records and a legal pad, her bright blue cast covered in signatures from the few visitors we'd allowed peeked out from beneath the blankets. I began writing letters. Not outbursts or guilt trips, but clear, calm accounts of what had happened and what would happen next. To Robert and Carolyn, I wrote, I'm including Ella's medical records so you can fully understand the severity of her injury and the consequences of your actions. As her mother, I trusted you to keep her safe. That trust has been irreparably broken. Ella now requires ongoing physical therapy and may need further surgery. She has missed the rest of her soccer season and may miss the beginning of next year's. She has suffered unnecessary trauma because of your refusal to take her pain seriously. After much reflection, I've decided to end our relationship. This is not temporary. This is not emotional. This is a necessary step to protect myself and my daughter. Effective immediately. Do not contact Ella in any way. Do not contact me except through the legal representative copied on this letter. Do not visit our home or Ella's school. Do not try to use other family members to relay messages. If any of these boundaries are crossed, I will pursue legal protection without hesitation. I make this decision with great sorrow, but greater clarity. I grew up believing that family ties were sacred. Ella's injury has broken that illusion. To Daniel, I wrote a similar letter with one specific addition. As a licensed medical professional, your failure to properly assess Ella's condition is especially inexcusable. You prioritized a dinner party over a child's broken leg. Your title may allow you to practice medicine, but your choices exposed a dangerous lack of judgment and compassion. I mailed all 3 letters via certified mail, with confirmation of delivery. Patricia, my attorney, received copies too. Then, I changed both of our phone numbers and created new email accounts, sharing them only with trusted people. Ella watched me drop the letters into the mailbox. Her face was thoughtful and far too serious for her age. "Is this forever?" she asked as we slowly climbed the stairs to our apartment, her on crutches, me carrying her bag. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Right now, we need space to heal, you physically, and both of us emotionally. Maybe someday, if they take responsibility and truly understand what they did, maybe. But that would mean they'd have to change in ways they never have before." She nodded slowly. "I feel sad, but also relieved." "Is that weird?" "Not at all," I said. "That's exactly how I feel too." The responses came fast and just as expected. My father's attorney contacted Patricia with thinly veiled threats about my mental health and so-called parental alienation. My mother left a tearful voicemail on my school's answering machine, the only number she still had, begging to talk to Ella just for a minute. Daniel somehow found my new email and sent a scathing message accusing me of slander and threatening legal action. None of them took ownership. None of them showed true remorse. Patricia responded to each of them with copies of Ella's medical documentation and formal statements from her doctors. The threats quickly died down, but the emotional guilt tripping continued on and off. Meanwhile, Ella kept healing. After 6 weeks of not bearing weight, she moved to a walking boot. Her physical therapy sessions 3 times a week slowly brought back her strength. Her therapist, Diane, included emotional support too, helping Ella work through the trauma of being hurt and not believed. My Aunt Eleanor became a steady presence in our lives, making the 3-hour drive every other weekend to help with groceries, laundry, or just to keep me company. Through her, over quiet evenings with tea after Ella went to bed, and Eleanor began sharing stories I'd never heard before, pieces of family history that suddenly made everything clearer. "Your grandfather did the same to your father," she told me one night. "Minimized his feelings, taught him to bottle things up, always favored the son who mirrored his own emotional detachment. Robert became exactly what he was raised to be." "That explains a lot," I said. "But it doesn't excuse it." "No," she agreed. "Understanding where a behavior starts doesn't mean you have to accept it in your life." As the weeks passed, Ella and I created new routines, new traditions to replace the old ones. Sunday mornings became pancake breakfasts, with whatever toppings we felt like. Friday nights turned into movie nights with takeout from local places we hadn't tried before. We even started a 2-person book club, reading the same novels and discussing them over hot chocolate. Instead of clinging to the family we had lost, we strengthened bonds with those who showed up for us, co-workers who filled in for me during Ella's appointments, neighbors who carried groceries or helped with the stairs, even Eric, who surprised both of us by flying in for a weekend to help with projects I'd put off for months. 3 months after surgery, Ella returned to school full-time. She still had mobility limitations, but her walking boot gave her back a sense of freedom. Her friends had been loyal throughout, bringing homework, gossip, and laughter during her recovery. Her teachers were kind and accommodating without making her feel different. That support group I'd joined for adults estranged from their parents became a lifeline. Through their stories, I began seeing my own upbringing more clearly. The constant criticism disguised as concern, the way my feelings were always dismissed, the golden child vs. scapegoat dynamic between Daniel and me. I realized that cutting ties hadn't been revenge, it had been survival. 6 months after the original injury, Ella underwent her second surgery to remove the hardware. It was less invasive and came with a faster recovery. By then, we hadn't heard directly from my parents or Daniel in nearly 3 months. I'd occasionally hear through mutual contacts that they were telling a very different story, one where they were the victims of my instability and overprotectiveness. But I no longer cared. The truth was in Ella's medical reports, in the scar on her leg, and in the therapy sessions she still attended. The truth was in our daily life, which had become quieter, more peaceful, free from constant judgment. On the day Ella was officially cleared for all activities, including soccer, we celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant. Over dessert, she looked at me thoughtfully. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking about Grandma, Grandpa, and Uncle Daniel." My stomach tensed. "What about them, sweetheart?" "I don't miss them as much as I thought I would." She traced a swirl in the chocolate sauce with her spoon. "Is that a terrible thing to say?" "Not at all," I assured her. "The people in your life should lift you up, not wear you down, even if they're family. I think I miss the idea of them more, she continued. Like having grandparents who come to school plays or an uncle who teaches me cool stuff. But the real them, they made me feel small, like my feelings didn't count. They made me feel that way too, I admitted. For most of my life, she nodded, far too wise for her age. I'm glad we don't feel that way anymore. As we walked home, Ella steady on her feet, no crutches, no limp. I realized how deeply we had healed, not just physically, but emotionally. We had rebuilt our sense of self, relearned what love was supposed to feel like, redefined what family meant. The injury had forced a reckoning that was long overdue. And we didn't just survive it, we grew because of it. 6 months after Ella's broken leg, our lives had settled into a new, healthier normal. Her physical recovery went exactly as Dr. Layden predicted. The second surgery left only a faint scar. Her coach had reintroduced her to training slowly, and now she was fully back on the team. The emotional healing took longer. Ella still had the occasional nightmare, being alone, hurt and scared. Sometimes a certain voice, or the scent of pine, or even the clink of Scrabble tiles would trigger a memory of that awful weekend. But therapy helped, and time helped. Those moments became less frequent and less intense. My own journey meant unlearning everything I'd been taught. I still caught myself bracing for criticism that never came, defending decisions no one was questioning, apologizing for things that didn't need apologies. I had to teach myself that I deserved space, deserved respect. My parents hadn't given up entirely. Every few weeks, a card would arrive for Ella, always cheerful, always avoiding the subject, always signed with love, Grandma and Grandpa. I let Ella choose whether to read them. Most of the time she didn't. They still don't get it, do they? She asked once, holding an unopened birthday card. They think if they just act normal, we'll pretend nothing happened. No, I told her. They can't face the truth about what they did. It would mean admitting they hurt someone. And for some people, that's too hard. They'd rather pretend. That's sad, Ella said softly, with a kind of compassion. That amazed me. It must be really lonely never being able to say you're sorry. Daniel had clearly moved on. Aunt Eleanor said he told the extended family that I had mental health problems and had cut everyone off for no reason. Few believed him, especially after Eleanor quietly explained the real story. But I didn't care. His refusal to take responsibility only reinforced the fact that cutting him off was the right thing to do. The most persistent contact attempts came from Carolyn. She'd leave messages with mutual friends, send letters to my school, even approached Ella's soccer coach once during a game. Thankfully, the coach, fully aware of our situation, shut it down immediately. My mother's messages were always the same. She missed us. She loved us. She didn't understand why I was being so extreme. Couldn't we just move on? Not once did she mention what they did. Not once did she apologize. But I held my boundaries. The legal steps I took early on worked. None of them came to our apartment. None contacted Ella directly. But the emotional campaign never really ended. Through the support group, I learned this tactic had a name: the missing reasons. People like my parents genuinely couldn't understand why I cut them off, because understanding would mean admitting fault. And that would threaten how they saw themselves. Knowing this didn't make it easier, but it helped me stop waiting for something that would never come: a real apology, a moment of change, a happy ending. Instead, I built a life where we didn't need any of that to be happy. Ella and I made our own traditions. Instead of awkward holidays at the lake house, we hosted small dinners with friends. On Thanksgiving, we volunteered at a shelter before sharing our meal with Melissa's family. Christmas became our private celebration, just the two of us, followed by a ski trip once Ella had healed enough, and Eleanor remained our only true family connection. Her visits were filled with stories, memories of my grandparents and great-grandparents that helped Ella feel rooted, but not poisoned by the past. The most unexpected shift came in my relationship with Eric. Our divorce had been civil but distant. After everything happened, he stepped up in ways I never expected, calling more often, visiting Ella when he could, even helping financially beyond his obligations. I should have been more present, he said during one of his visits. Watching what your parents did made me realize I've been failing her too, just in a different way. His honesty and willingness to change stood in stark contrast to my parents' defensiveness. It wasn't romantic, just a different kind of healing, a better co-parenting partnership. A safer space for Ella.as. For her, she amazed me every day. She handled her recovery with strength and patience. She worked through her emotions with clarity most adults never reach. One evening, while we walked the neighbor's dog a new part of her therapy routine, she said something I'll never forget. "You know what's weird, Mom?" she asked. "I think I learned more from them not being in our lives than I ever did when they were." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I learned what kind of person I don't want to be. Someone who can't admit they're wrong. Someone who cares more about being right than how other people feel. Someone who makes others feel small just to feel big." I stopped in my tracks. "That's a powerful lesson, Ella." She shrugged with a smile. "Maya Angelou said that, right? When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." "She did," I said, smiling back. And she was absolutely right. That in the end was the most powerful thing we learned. My parents and Daniel had shown me who they were over and over again. And for too long, I excused it. I normalized it. I blamed myself. It took what they did to Ella for me to finally break free. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and care. And sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is walk away even if that walk is painful. Creating boundaries, even permanent ones, is not cruel. It's survival. It's protection. And in our case, it was the only way forward. Ella will always carry a faint scar on her leg, a quiet reminder of that weekend. But the deeper wounds, we faced them, we healed them, and we made sure they wouldn't happen again. As for me, I no longer lie awake wondering if I'm too sensitive, too emotional, or too much. I know the truth, and I know I did what any loving mother would do. Some relationships can't be mended not because you didn't try, but because the other person refuses to admit the damage they've caused. Some things break, and they should stay broken. Healing doesn't come from putting shattered pieces back together. It comes from finding the ones worth saving and using them to build something new, something stronger, something whole. Have you ever had to make a hard decision to protect yourself or someone you love? How did you find the strength to do it? Share your story in the comments. And if this helped you, please like, subscribe, and pass it along to someone who might need to hear that. Sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Thank you for listening. And remember, your worth is never defined by those who failed to see it.